Our politicians, then. So Keir Starmer's premiership, they're saying, could be under threat, as Labour MPs are themselves reportedly plotting against his leadership.
You think the royal family drama is spicy? Bless your heart. We're talking about a political implosion so spectacular, it makes the abdication crisis look like a minor family squabble over who gets the last scone. Forget the crown jewels. The only thing glittering in Westminster right now is the sheer magnificent brass of Keir Starmer's ongoing delusion, a man marketed as the safe pair of hands, the grown-up in the room, who promised to restore integrity and accountability, and promptly delivered Lord Arley and the freebie scandal, making him less grown-up and more toddler in a china shop, except the china is the entire British economy. Quick favour, if you're loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It's free. Takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks, if you did. Now back to the show. The sheer staggering truth is this. Keir Starmer is currently navigating the political landscape with the popularity of a parking warden on Christmas morning, with a recent poll suggesting only 14% of Britons would bother casting a vote for Labour if an election was tomorrow, a figure which should surprise precisely nobody watching the slow-motion car crash that is his leadership, as this is a man who was supposed to be the sensible antidote to, well, everything, but instead has emerged as a political entity devoid of basic leadership skills, a clear vision and, crucially, the ability to inspire a pigeon to cross the road, let alone an entire nation to vote for him, possessing the human skills of a damp sponge, the oratorical prowess of a badly maintained traffic light, and the combined wit, charisma or charm of a spreadsheet error, with friends bless their loyal hearts, claiming he's merely pleasant enough in private, which is the equivalent of saying your favourite dish is room temperature toast, hardly a rallying cry for the next Prime Minister. But here is where the story pivots from mere political incompetence to a full-blown crisis of integrity, because worse than his blandness, worse than his lack of political gravity, is his penchant for lying, on repeat, a breathtaking exhibition of political audacity, where when challenged on a previous statement, he simply says whatever he thinks he can get away with in that moment, and even when caught red-handed with the incontrovertible receipts laid out before him, he insists it's all absolutely true, and blunders on like a pantomime villain who refuses to accept the curtain call, treating the public like an imbecile who can't remember yesterday's headline, causing patience to snap because his promised integrity and accountability is the political equivalent of a deeply discounted flat-pack wardrobe. It sounds great on the box, but when you actually try to put it together, everything falls to pieces in your hands. Now, you might think it's just his personal failings, the charisma void, the integrity bypass that are turning the party faithful against him, and while his lack of political oomph definitely annoys them, it's not the main course of the rebellion, it's merely the slightly stale appetizer, as the real burning grievance, the thing that has his own political family reaching for the ejector seat, is the sheer unmitigated horror show that is Starmer's policy agenda, a catalogue of political self-sabotage that is genuinely astonishing, having endured the frankly baffling Chagos sellout, the masterstroke of alienating a core voting demographic with the winter fuel payment fiasco, presiding over a crippling tax raid on farmers and family firms, a brilliant strategy if your long-term goal is to ensure the only thing growing in Britain is public debt, and the sheer appalling failure to get a grip on the small boats crisis, an ongoing humanitarian and national security disgrace, added to the constant, excruciating foot-dragging over the grooming gang's inquiry, which feels less like cautious legal process and more like a deliberate attempt to bury a profoundly uncomfortable truth. The economy, meanwhile, is doing a perfect impression of a flat battery, with two truly horrible budgets causing the nation's financial engine to flatline, the cost of living crisis raging on like an untamed inferno, and unemployment doing that awkward little climb back up the ladder that absolutely no one wanted to see, meaning the average voter would boot him out tomorrow if they could get their hands on a ballot box, but unfortunately for them and for Starmer's stress levels, they won't get that glorious chance for another 3 years or so. Though here is the magnificent bit, the voters aren't the only ones in revolt, as the Labour politicians themselves have had enough, and they can actually do something about it. It is the oldest dance in Westminster, the political Game of Thrones, if you will, but with less actual bloodshed and more carefully worded press releases, as the hyenas are gathering around the wounded beast. Wes Streeting, with his strangely unsettling air of competence, is absolutely circling the perimeter. Angela Rayner, the political firecracker, is never far from the headlines and certainly doesn't lack the gumption or the ambition. And of course there's Andy Burnham, the perpetually waiting in the wings mayor of Greater Manchester, whose popularity is a constant nagging indictment of Starmer's national appeal, signifying not just internal jostling, but a clear, unambiguous signal that the political knives are being sharpened, where the central question isn't if Starmer will fall, but when the blade will find its target. leaving the air thick with the scent of ambition and political betrayal. But wait! Just when you thought the internal Labour drama was the main event, the political kaleidoscope twists into something far more bizarre, as the true political chaos is erupting on the left flank of the party, with the far left in full cry, a terrifying spectacle of political detachment from reality, exemplified by the glorious emergence of the utterly laughable Your Party, set up by the likes of Zara Sultana, and yes, the political zombie himself, Jeremy Corbyn, a splinter group destined for political irrelevance, yet a brilliant visual cue of the ideological rupture, and the equally ludicrous Greens, with Zach Polanski leading them towards the glorious political la-la land of utter utopian fantasy. And it's not just the activists, as the unions are in open revolt, a genuine political earthquake where Labour's single largest donor, the mighty and combustible Unite Union, led by the utterly uncompromising Sharon Graham, is threatening the ultimate humiliation, cutting their financial ties, which is not a symbolic gesture but a threat to turn off the life support machine, as they, like the rest of us, are fed up. But here is the absolute mind-bending plot twist. The reason this whole story is so politically delicious. You and I, the sane observers, might loathe Starmer because he presented himself as a moderate, a Tony Blair-like figure, a safe bet to win power, and then quickly, shamelessly revealed his true, tepid, hard-left colours, despising him for the con. But that's not why the far left hate him. The real reason is so staggeringly, magnificently insane, it requires a moment of genuine contemplation. They think Starmer's government is failing, not because it's incompetent, not because the policies are ruinous, but because it isn't left-wing enough. In their truly unhinged view, the solution to the economic flatline is to tax more, spend more, and borrow more, the political equivalent of trying to put out a house fire with a can of petrol. And instead of stronger border controls to manage the small boats crisis, they want more immigration and more asylum seekers, effectively throwing the national door wide open. And instead of tackling the profoundly serious issue of the grooming gangs with the full force of the law, they want to scrap the inquiry entirely and bury the whole horrific subject beneath a thick blanket of political correctness, which is beyond insane, a terrifying glimpse into a political ideology that has completely lost touch with the reality of the British public. This brings us to the most dangerous part of the story, because the voters, stuck in a 3-year electoral holding pattern, can't boot out Starmer, but a terrifying Hydra-headed coalition is forming, and they absolutely can, a terrifying new political force made up of Labour cabinet careerists, posturing backbench MPs, unhinged activists, militant unions, the Corbynites, Islamists, and even the Lib Dems, an anti-Starmer alliance actively pushing to replace him with something even more extreme, whose goal isn't just to get rid of a poor leader, but to launch Labour even further to the hard left, a political trajectory that would make the 1980s look like a tame garden party. And even if the Prime Minister, bless his utterly underwhelming soul, manages to survive this internal war of attrition, the victory will be utterly hollow, as this coalition of the extreme will force him even further left to save his own political skin, turning him into a mere puppet of the ideological fringe. But if he falls, however, the consequences are stark and genuinely frightening. These lunatics, these political radicals completely disconnected from the national mood, could be running the country by the summer, a prospect that should send a shiver down the spine of every sensible Briton, regardless of their political stripe. Because the internal squabbling of the Labour Party is no longer just a spectator sport, it's a clear and present danger to the moderate, functioning governance of the United Kingdom, where Starmer's weakness is their opportunity, and their ambition is utterly terrifying. So the petition has begun, the internal battles are raging, and the fate of the nation is currently resting on the charisma of a man who makes beige paint look exciting. The coming months are going to be wild. Thank you so much for watching.